Welcome, primary voters, and thank you for joining us. I'm Elizabeth Benyon, Director of Voter Services and Education for the League of Women Voters of the South Bend area and the American Democracy Project of IU South Bend. In this special candidate interview, we are joined by David Niezgodski. He is the incumbent Democratic candidate for Indiana Senate District 10, and this is part of our Take 10 series with candidates running in contested primary races on your St. Joseph County, Indiana ballots. Welcome, Senator.
Welcome. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate being here today, and I want to thank the American Democracy Project and the League of Women Voters for helping put this on to help the voters in the area.
Well, let's get started by asking you to talk a little bit about your background and experiences. What is it that you think you bring to this office?
Well, what I think I bring to the office is that more so than anything else, I'm a people's person. I've been involved in my community for years with a local business that I help run. And I think I have a great pulse for the community. So, you know, I started in 1998 when I was first elected to the county council, and I was reelected to the second term, and I served for a total of 6 years. After that, I became a second district commissioner when Beverly Crone retired. That was a special election that took place. And at 2006, I had the opportunity to run for the legislature, and that's when my service began. And I say it repeatedly, I've said it for years, once elected, I run as a Democrat, but once elected, your job is to serve all of the people you represent to the very best of your ability. And this supersedes all else. And I faithfully served as a dedicated public servant during my entire year as an elected, or my entire time as an elected official. And my job is helping people. So the bottom line is I believe in practicing civility in government.
Thank you very much. The next question I'd like to ask you is, what if you could just pick one bill that you'd like to sponsor in the 2021 legislative session, what would it be and why?
There are so many things that will lie ahead of us coming forward, and there are a number of bills that I can think of, but I'm going to go back to a bill that I have authored before, and it's one bill that I want to see become law. And that'll be a bill for filing for a mandatory adoption subsidies for children with special needs. In 2019, I authored this bill, and it passed unanimously, 7-0 out of the Family and Children's Services Committee. So obviously that was with strong bipartisan support. Working across the aisle, I was able to get this proposal actually added into the budget. In the final negotiations with the House, unfortunately, it was removed on the last day of session due to its multi-million-dollar fiscal impact. But I remained diligent, and I asked for it to be a topic during the interim study committees of 2019. It was selected. And during this time of crisis, I believe it's our obligation to protect our state's most vulnerable. Children that are coming from broken homes and they're in need of adoption, they have done nothing wrong. Their special needs require that adoptive parents receive a subsidy to provide for their ongoing care. I know that this bill could become reality because it's completely nonpartisan. We owe it to these children, and we owe it to the parents wishing to adopt them to provide them loving homes.
As you know, Indiana taxpayers fund 4 streams of education: traditional public schools, school choice vouchers, and also charter schools and some online education. What, if anything, would you like to change about the way education is funded in the state of Indiana?
Well, I certainly believe that more dollars need to go to public schools. We hear, and we've been told the last couple sessions that funding for public schools is at its highest level ever, but this simply is not true. In 2009, Governor Daniels removed $300 million from public education funding, and he supplemented these dollars with federal surplus dollars that were provided by the Obama administration. When the surplus went away, these dollars were never replaced. So the bottom line, teachers deserve raises, we know this, and these dollars could be put towards that purpose. I'd also stop further expansion of vouchers to private schools. I'd also like to make sure that the same accountability standards are applied to private and charter schools that are required of public schools. Finally, I believe further investigation, much further investigation is warranted concerning the fraud that has taken place within 2 certain virtual charter schools. I'll work to ensure that that will never happen again. Those that have committed this fraud, they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Sometimes Democrats have criticized the legislature for not doing enough to address the issue of stagnant wages and rising healthcare costs, as well as teacher pay and general quality of education overall in the state of Indiana. Do you share this criticism? And if so, do you think the state can really afford to do more than it's already doing?
With what we're going through right now, we're going to find out just what the state's going to be able to do. So I do believe that we always can do more and that we have to, but we're going to be facing some very big obstacles. But the state legislature, I do not believe, has done enough to address these issues. In the previous short session, there were good efforts that were made concerning the rising cost of healthcare. Price negotiations that take place all the time between hospitals and doctors and insurance companies, they were addressed. And these negotiations greatly affect the costs we pay when we're billed for treatment. But this was only a beginning. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought to the surface stark evidence of how unacceptable current wages are across the state. The $2.2 trillion rescue plan recently passed by Congress sheds much light on wage stagnation. It's been 12 years since we've had a minimum wage increase, and it's past time. Families need better wages to care for their children. Whether you rent or own, is the expectation of safe and affordable living arrangements asking too much? I also believe that raising teacher pay could be addressed again, in large part by replacing the surplus dollars that were used elsewhere by Governor Daniels during the Obama years. And obviously that we'd have to reach further into the rainy day fund. But there are a number of different proposals that we have put forward just during last session. And I do know that if we have the opportunity, we can solve these things.
The next question I want to ask you is about marijuana. As you know, our neighbor just a few miles north has legalized marijuana for both medicinal and recreational purposes. What is your position in terms of the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana? And if it should be decriminalized or legalized, would this be only for medicinal purposes or also recreational? What do you think would be best for Indiana?
Yes, thank you for the question. I'll tell you what, we did polling. Polling as far as reaching out to our constituents, that was on our going into session and asking people what they felt prior to us going in. And then we put all of the different results of the different state senators together. And I'll tell you, across the state, it's very, very strong for the medicinal use of marijuana. It's actually people for recreational use are a little closer, but it's still leaning towards doing that. But the bottom line is the federal government's they'll eventually decide on a uniform national policy, but it doesn't appear that's going to happen anytime soon. We know that our jail and prison populations are overwhelmed, and many who are serving sentences in jail right now, it's because of current marijuana sentencing laws. 26 states and Washington, D.C. have partially or completely decriminalized the plant. 33 states now have either medicinal or recreational marijuana laws. My position is that Indiana should immediately legalize, meaning when we go back to session, we should pass laws to legalize the use of medicinal marijuana. I also favor the decriminalization of marijuana if you're found to be in a possession of quantities less than an ounce. If these new laws are put in place, then I believe much greater study could be done to determine if Indiana should take the final step of legalizing recreational marijuana use.
Thank you. Now, one of the other issues that we heard on the national debate stage was the issue of college tuitions. Some members of the Indiana state legislature and also some Democratic presidential candidates have proposed free college. What do you think of that plan, or what would be your plan to make college more affordable, and also other forms of post-high school education?
Yes, thank you. I do believe that we can and we should make post-secondary education more affordable to everyone, whether it's geared towards vocational or STEM studies or whatever manner of studies you want to choose. It really shouldn't matter. I think it would be myself too costly to provide post-secondary education completely free. However, one way to make it much more affordable would be to offer tax credits to those remaining in Indiana's workforce upon their graduation. For each year a graduate would continue to live and work in Indiana within the field of their studies, this tax credit would go to lowering the cost of their education. These dollars could then be put and they could use to be paid down existing student loans or other debt obligations. Grants could also be provided to those seeking to dedicate their lives in fields relating to helping others. Doctors, nurses, teachers, and social workers are just a few to come to mind. And in fact, in the past, when I was in the House, I did author legislation calling for just this. And in future years, we've also, or as the years went on, you saw other legislators start to take on these ideas. So by providing for others and remaining in Indiana with like the doctors and nurses and these type of people that help people, for a term of years, Indiana will realize a much greater benefit because of this.
Now, how would you rate the state's response to the novel coronavirus? And do you have any specific ideas for policies or steps the state should be taking to fight this pandemic?
I think the state has done a very good job to the extent that I do believe Governor Holcomb made decisions that were based upon Indiana. They weren't based upon other states. I don't think anyone is truly certain where our new normal is and just exactly how we're going to proceed from here. But I think a lot of the steps he did take were good. But I think some additional stuff we're going to have to face, and I believe they're beginning to look at it. But this is going to take us when we go into session and talking about in the summer study committees. But 3 specific steps that I would take would be: I think state government should try to protect the physical and economic health of Hoosiers as follows. We should create a needs assessment panel made up of mental health experts. And I think if it were chaired by Dr. Jennifer Sullivan, the Secretary of FSSA, that would be a good start. I think we know there's going to be a much greater need for additional mental health service providers. This panel could determine just what those needs are, and we could report to the governor and the legislature. If we need to, we would use rainy day funds. Also, I called earlier on for the National Guard to be used in this questionnaire on 411. I believe that the National Guard, they could set up satellite food banks in neighborhoods and rural areas throughout the state, and they could be used for setup and food distribution. Now, we've seen the National Guard; they're already in use in the food bank of Northern Indiana. It's been an honor because for several weeks, I and actually Representative Ross Deal have helped distribute food there and have gotten the chance to work alongside with them. So they're already being used for that exact purpose. So I still believe we've got a ways to go through this. And I think that further using them and by this use could go a long way.
So you've mentioned a lot of policy priorities and positions that you have, but of course the Indiana General Assembly in both the House and the Senate has a Republican majority. And so I wonder what advice you would give or what practices you try to follow to actually be able to enact any of your priorities into legislation.
Yes, thank you for that question. I think a lot of things just boil down to simple common sense. My predecessor in the House, Tom Kromkowski, he once told me, to become an effective legislature, you have to learn the rules. And I believed he was referring to the respective rules of the House chamber. But looking back throughout the 14 years that I've now been in the legislature, I've come to realize that he meant a great deal more. This last session, I, along with Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray, and 2 members also from the House, were presented with a 2020 Civility in Government Award. This was a great honor. It's like the old saying goes, you're only as good as your word. I've found that simple respect and civility in government is the mechanism to building trust and garnering friendships on both sides of the aisle. You don't get everything you want, especially while serving in the minority, but only elections can change that. Most most legislators are doing their best to accomplish good, even if they may not see things in the same manner that you do. That doesn't make them bad people. If you sincerely try to get to know them better and learn a little bit more about their personal lives, what you find can be quite surprising. They may do the same thing for you. That's the beginning of building bridges. And I believe once you have established a bridge, you are well on your way to becoming a better and more effective legislator.
Thank you very much, Senator Niezgodski. And voters, don't forget to mail in those ballots unless you are going in person. Remember, in-person voting will be limited. Go to vote411.org to hear more from Senator Niezgodski and other candidates, and share this video with your friends. Thank you very much.